Okay, this is episode 43 of Counterpoints. Don't have any sort of witty introduction about esports pools and fantasy and betting and all that stuff, but even in saying that I don't have one, you heard me just say esports pools, fantasy and betting. So I've actually fulfilled all my requirements. That's how easy this job can be sometimes. You know, just show up and no matter the result, I get paid. Now, Zeus knows all about that. He's been a coach of Team Liquid for... I mean, what is it now? When did you join the Machinery team? Do you remember?
I think it was end of November last year. Pretty sure.
Yes, that's right.
It was Northern Arena.
Yeah, because I've just remembered you were still on Immortals at like IEM Oakland, right?
No, in Oakland I was with Team Liquid. Last event I did for Immortals was Brazil. Piece of work.
Okay. So I mean, just thought, well, once you've go out on top. You know,
you had a couple. You had a couple.
You were dominating individually. You know, the game was just completely under control, and you thought, you know what? I've won majors. I've done it as a player. So just go and get some money coaching these NA teams. It's easy money. There's no one out there doing that.
Oh, it is not easy money.
No, it isn't. You got to work fairly hard, right?
Got to work here, man.
Exactly. So obviously, Zeus, coach of Team Liquid, a team making finals now. Used to coach SK Gaming. When they were, back when they used to like to win majors. They don't do that anymore, that's just, that was 2016, they're going a different route now. So, Moses here, usual co-host, I'm sure you all are aware of him. He's the egg-shaped fellow in the middle of the overlay. But, also, Moses, I'm going listen, Pasha, calm the fuck down, right? I've got a question to ask you, Moses. Why on that graphic where they showed the predictions for the group that Team Liquid was playing in? Why when they showed they had a cutout of each person's
E-League?
Yes, E-League had a cutout of each person's glamour shots that they do at the beginning of the season for who was making each prediction. But bizarrely, your glamour shot made you look like you were the tallest of all the people there. Meanwhile, Dan was
doesn't even look like Dan, does it?
It's not even a joke about his head now, but he was his entire body was shrunk disproportionately small. Why was that? Why not just make it uniform?
I don't know. Maybe they're making up for all the other photoshops. They've literally photoshopped me into the egg in Game of Thrones, the dragon egg. So sometimes they have to be a little kind.
I did like that one though, where
it doesn't even look like I don't even know who that is when Dan's picture comes up in his glamour shot.
Photoshopped to fucking it.
It's unreal.
It's mad. I like the one where they just photoshopped everyone, because you and Richard obviously have the same bald head, but with beard look, where they just photoshopped a bald head onto Semler's head.
Yeah,
that looked amazing. It was so disturbing.
That was really fucking awkward. I hope he never goes bald. He told me he's starting to he sees it coming in the future, so I'm worried for him a little bit.
Okay. Well, maybe they made you bigger on that graphic to represent the fact that in the casting world, you have only grown bigger and acquired strength and position, and now obviously you can demand, more representation. You get more of the show. So you're on top now, right?
Yeah, that was in my negotiations for the season. I was like, listen, now that I'm a bigger deal than seasons 1 and 2, I demand that in all of the graphics, I'm taller than Dan. I want to be the largest photograph in every graphic. No more eggs.
No, no more eggs. That was just the final demand was it. And by the way, no more eggs. What do you mean now? I will not be photoshopped as an egg, represented as an egg, called an egg in any way.
Yep.
And then they're like, bloody hell, the demands that this
the
talent
diva,
makes nowadays.
The diva of this guy.
Okay, so this episode, the concept was, again, it's going to be a hybrid. So in the last episode, we did one that was quite abstract. We just talked about the concept of loose playing styles, and we went into some historical examples of them and tried to break down some of the concepts. So this is a bit like that, but it's also topical because we've now seen, not 3 full tournaments, but we've seen 2.5 tournaments from the new FaZe lineup. We saw DreamHack Malmo, where obviously they actually didn't manage to get out of the group. They didn't do very well there. Admittedly, they were in a group that had NIP and Gambit, 2 teams who made it to the top 4. But even so, they didn't do as well as expected. That should be a group you had chances in. Then they had the group stage for E-League, but obviously the playoffs have yet to happen. They'll actually happen later this week. Let me think. It's Sunday today. So next week the playoffs will begin, and then they've played
Tuesday,
obviously Obviously, the other tournament they played, which Zeus is well aware of, is ESL1 New York, because they met Team Liquid in the final there. And to be fair, at least Team Liquid almost won a map. Everyone else was just getting bent over. At least Team Liquid had a chance, right? They fucking almost did it. Probably not the most satisfying way to lose a map, though. Just literally getting sprayed down through a smoke as Stanislav throws a nade at his own feet. That was outrageous, wasn't it? Because, like, here's the thing. If that happens, Zeus, even at, like, 16 or 11, that's, like, the round it happens. You go, well, we were trying, but, it went bad. It's the fact that that was the round to get to overtime was like, why?
With their economy low after a comeback.
And you guys had to grind out like 5 rounds straight to even get to that fucking point. It's just such a kick in the dick watching that game.
Yeah, kick in the dick, I think, sums that up pretty nicely.
So, okay, the point I'm making is, though, FaZe Clan actually still haven't played that much. I know they've played a bunch of, obviously, online games, but in terms of LANs, we haven't seen much, and at the moment, it's been kind of a mixed bag. Like, when I look at those 3 tournaments, they actually have been kind of powering up in order. Like, the first one, the Malmo one, like, here's the thing. Considering they didn't get out of the groups, I actually thought people were a bit too harsh, They were all right in that series. Like, they lost a 3-map series to Gambit. They played decently enough. They were a brand new team. They literally had barely practiced at all. And they looked all right, actually. Then at the E-League group, obviously that was a pretty good group they were in. They were in the one with G2 and Na'Vi. So I consider that one of the stacked groups. And they did very well. They came out first place. And then, obviously, New York was, it's almost beyond all the superlatives, right? If you don't lose a single map, and most maps you just crush every team, and every player pretty much is having ridiculous numbers and better numbers than even people like Nico were having higher numbers than even Nico normally has, and he's one of the best players in the world. So I almost feel like they've gone through the full range of how good they can be. So what I want to know is this. Now they're coming in the favourite. Most people think, well, logically they should win all the tournaments because at the moment, SK and Astralis haven't won in a while. G2's only won the one tournament. It's kind of hard to figure out who the big prime favourites are. So I want to know this, Zeus, to start off with. Is FaZe the clear number 1 team for you?
I think right now, yeah. They're the number 1 team. The way they did it in New York, I see it was impressive. Like you said, all of them performed lights out, just like there was nothing anyone could do against them. I think they've been on a rising, but it does get different once you are at the top to maintain yourself. People adapt a lot better, everything like that. I don't know how it's going to go forward necessarily, but right now they are the favorites for the next LAN tournament for sure.
When you were playing that game, the first map of the final, the one that was on Inferno, where they literally 15-0'd on CT side of Inferno, right? That's the sort of game I always want to know what players and what people are thinking during a match like that. Because obviously, it looked as though there was like nothing you could do. Like in every scenario, like they were even just killing people blind through smokes and stuff, It looked like, it never felt like there was real 5-on-5 rounds, There was very few where you were in with a chance to actually win the rounds. When that's actually happening, do you think that was FaZe just that good? Was the team was how dominant they were shaking your team? Why did it look like such a ridiculous mismatch?
I honestly think FaZe were. It's mostly props to them because at least from our part, there were a lot of shots that were coming through smoke and we were losing early on. So a little bit of luck on some of those, but even the rounds they weren't supposed to be winning, like Nico would one tap 3 people coming into a site just playing around. Rain was going on. Kerrigan was, I think, 15-0, 16-0. All of them were just shutting us down everywhere. Like we tried our safe strats, our go-to strats. Those didn't work because Kerrigan did a really good job understanding those. So when we ran them, they had a something countered already prepared for it. In the defaults, they just killed us everywhere.
Sure. That's one of the reasons why I was so shocked by the final. Like, I actually think it's quite reasonable that there was the one map that was at least close, because I thought it would have been ridiculous if Team Liquid got completely 3-0'd and also just never got any rounds, because in the tournament, you'd obviously be one of the best teams, got a lot of rounds. But I still almost can't believe that final happened, because when I watched all the other matches of FaZe, I was like, okay, yeah, they're playing really well here, but some of the teams they were playing against, some of them weren't that sick. Like the new Cloud9 lineup's got a lot of issues with them, they're still just coming together slowly. So I almost can't even still believe that can repeat. Like, do you actually think FaZe can do this at other tournaments?
No, I don't think that it'll be as dominant as this, like I said, because people are going to start studying them. And as much as I would give them all the props for winning, the series of events that happened were completely against us in a sense. Like after that 15-0, you can't expect us to bring ourselves back from that. Once we do an overpass, the way it ended, so map 2 was, like you said, on a crucial round, a huge fuck up on our part. and we lost. And then map 3, no way we're coming back after getting beaten down so badly the first map and throwing away our opportunity at the second one. So I don't think stats tell a full story. And against the other teams, I mean, Cloud9 got obliterated, but they faced, I think it was Navi, right? And VP they got through, and Astralis was not Astralis that tournament like everyone said.
Yeah. Moses, what do you think of the new FaZe?
I don't know if I'd call them favorites for ELEAGUE, but I mean certainly they're like the scariest team. But I think it's hard to call them a favorite just because I feel like the reason people are putting them there, or the reason people feel that way at the moment, is because we've seen such lackluster and like uninspired play out of SK and out of Astralis. I think those two teams still with the pedigree, I feel like should be above. But I mean you do have to admit that they've just been playing so bad lately. It's hard to have confidence in that. I think the thing about the new FaZe is, especially at New York. I mean Kerrigan referenced it in some of the interviews. I think it was at New York where he was just like, this is all well and good. This is great. This was a fun tournament. Everyone just wrecked house. But we need to come up with some kind of a plan, some kind of a structure if we don't have the individuals play, like all 4 of our star players playing the way they did in New York. And I think that's where I think FaZe will start to kind of neuter themselves in a certain way. Like we saw it at a FaZe right when Nico joined, right? Is like we've referenced a couple times that opening tournament of Katowice is probably the best they looked during their run, even despite winning Star Ladder. But once you start trying to like make an actual playbook and make actual structure, I think you do kind of limit yourself in those individual plays, which at the moment just seems like a strength of FaZe considering their roster. And that's the question is what is they going to look like when someone actually challenges them? Because we didn't see that at New York. I kind of throw Malmo out because it was within a week of that roster becoming finalized. ELEAGUE, they played Navi, who's looked awful, who's looked like a one-man army. And they played Renegades, who just isn't at that level. So I mean, when you look at New York and those tournaments, they haven't been challenged since Gambit, which was a week into their lifeline. So I think there's still plenty of questions about this team, but they're certainly the scariest in terms of what this roster can do.
Okay, so that's actually a question I have then. So in that game, the one map that was close in New York, the overpass game, Zeus, one of the things that I thought was interesting here was, right, you guys in general were playing the way you'd been playing the whole week, like everyone's seen your T-side's pretty good, but like actually that's one of the maps especially where I've really seen the impact Nitro's had, because you can always see how he sort of like draws Twist into the entry situations, he'll like rush around a corner, and then that allows Twist to, in theory, trade onto the other guy if Nitro dies. So that T-side seemed fine from your side, but actually I noticed that's where I saw the only kind of holes from FaZe the whole week, because on the CT side there were times where when they were losing all those rounds in a row, they got caught out of position. Like I saw a bunch of times Guardian just was like in the middle of nowhere, with no protection, no one to flash him out, and because before in every round on CT they were just killing everyone, so people almost like thought that they couldn't. It's like I noticed that the team play didn't seem that crazy from FaZe in that sense.
Yeah, I think that during that finals, they got a little cocky, but that's what happens when you're shooting people. You do get overconfident, and that's a lot of their style of play, right? They do challenge you up front. They take those aim duels, and until you can punish them, they will keep getting in your face. And like I said, that's going to work for a while, or it worked at least until New York, but I think people are going to catch on to that. And after that, they're going to need a more structured foundation like Moses, because when you don't have your stars popping off, what guarantees you to go get a good performance is coming back to those fundamentals and to a foundation level thing where people play off each other, right? Because you can't always guarantee that everyone's going to be going insane like that. So I'm not really sure, right? I think that they're 100% on the right track. I still think that they are the favorites, just because in that sense, like SK has been dropping off in a sense, Astralis as well, but not because of their results, but because of their momentum and where they are right now as a team, right? Everyone's going to be scared of them, and if people play scared against them, they're not going to have space. The FaZe is still going to dominate. That's why, interestingly enough, I think SK is going to be FaZe's weakness. They have been in the past. I think SK hasn't lost to FaZe in quite a while. I remember the ECS finals and everything like that. It's just their style plays very well, right? Even the slumping SK, their fundamentals and their structure are there. So I'm really interested to watch that matchup.
Yeah, so this is a question I have then. So let's talk about this, Moses. This is one thing, okay, when you're talking about FaZe being a potential number one, or maybe they can be the best team for the next few months, obviously even if these other teams aren't winning tournaments, like SK and Astralis haven't won in a while now, especially not Astralis actually. Even so, odds are you're going to meet them sooner or later. Like you're probably going to play one in a quarterfinal or a semi-final or whatever it might be. And so whether or not those teams can win the tournament is actually irrelevant. It's whether they can win this one match. So what do you actually think if these teams match up most? Like which ones do you think would be favoured or have a good chance, or who stylistically would be a good matchup for FaZe, you think?
I think SK would be a good matchup, but the scary thing about that is the tournaments that we've seen them at, they've played like such pussies. Like they don't seem like there's anyone on that team who really wants to take those fights anymore. Like you don't have, the Coldzera and Taco combination like taking map control. Everyone's very passive. Everyone's almost like sitting back questioning and waiting for something to happen. And it doesn't seem like anyone at the moment is willing to be the initiator for that, or they just don't seem to have that strength that they used to have to create avenues on the map on their T side. In terms of Astralis, I think FaZe is still going to be kind of their kryptonite in a certain sense as they were throughout the early portions of this year, just because we've referenced it a number of times. Astralis plays such good fundamental Counter-Strike that they're sometimes unwilling to break out of like the theoretical side of CS and just have someone like make a play or kind of change the tides on his own. And FaZe has 4 of those players, and I think that'll be the big advantage that they're able to have. But I do think I don't think FaZe's CT sides are going to be as weak as we saw, against Liquid, for instance, on that Overpass match. I think CT sides is like the hardest thing for a new team to start to work on together and to improve, because it takes a whole new level of intuition and reading the game and being proactive in certain part of the maps, and that's normally the thing I think new teams struggle with is finding ways as the CT side to have a defense that can be aggressive enough to take control and to kind of dictate where the terrorists can go, but also not overextend and get punished for it. So I think that's most of what we saw to FaZe. When you reference they were kind of getting caught out of position, was just a CT side that didn't have the cohesiveness to it, so the individuals felt like they had to do something at all times, and it just happened to work at that event. But I think certainly against those two teams at the moment, I think FaZe has an advantage over both of them, but I think SK is the team that is most likely to be a challenge with the way that team is set up, in the future, if they can bounce back, if they can get out of this slump or whatever funk they're in.
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on what SK we're going to see, right? Because if we date back, I count mostly LAN because online is just crazy as always, right? So on LAN, like if we look at SK, in my opinion, they had that Malmo tournament beat. They lost in that 15-10 crazy round on Inferno against G2 where Phelps and Fur just fucked up. So I think that's where their confidence started going a little bit. Then Malmo's that. Then in Greece, they lose to us, which we weren't seen as a team that, at least until Greece, the team that should be beating SK or anything like that, or even contending. So that gets in their heads a little bit. And in New York, they face us again, and we prove that we're still we're a team that's contending. But in their, I don't know if in their eyes they're like Team Liquid is that, so that all starts chipping away. So I'm interested to see the next LAN, right? ELEAGUE was just the culmination of everything going downhill for them, I think. Online, they're gonna have to rebuild them. That was just, I mean, no one I think, if we speak honestly, no one expected Heroic to get out of the group, and we knew that if SK, we at least thought SK would be the hardest challenge. We never got to face Heroic, so that's on them. But
that loss to Heroic was like the thing that like really kind of tilted me about SK, because Heroic didn't like do anything that crazy. I didn't think they just played like typical Danish team. They just played it like mistake-free Counter-Strike. They just played very, very standard, and they just didn't their entire goal was minimize our mistakes and just punish all of them. And SK seemed like they were waiting for those mistakes to happen, and when they never did, they didn't have that response to it. So that's what worries me about SK, is that normally that's a team with Fallen as an in-game leader, we see them finding mistakes and punishing mistakes and probing to find where they can find a weakness. But this time it wasn't anything like that. It was just kind of sit around the map and wait for someone from Heroic to push, and that'll be our opening. But it never happened.
I think that falls into what you were saying, that I think that they're losing their confidence, and that leaves them to play more passive and not make the plays, because SK was always, in my view, really good fundamental, but they also had the players who, like Fur or Coldzera or anybody would show up at any moment following, who would get a kill, and even Taco lurking, they would do something more unethical and get those kills. But I don't think that they are having the confidence to do that. They need to bounce back. If SK bounces back and is at least at that Malmo phase, that's when I want to see them face FaZe, right? If it's an SK that's too scared to play, then if that'll fit into FaZe's hand perfectly. Like I said, if people respect them too much, they are just going to obliterate, because the skill on that team is crazy.
That's also, though, why I actually SK is one of the teams I want to see match up. It doesn't matter whether SK can, for a whole tournament be as good as they used to. It's like actually E-League's a perfect example for me, because in the Heroic series, that was like the worst I think they've looked during this entire period. That was really, really bad. But obviously just before that remember, they had to play back-to-back best of threes, was the one they played against Team Liquid. And in that one, the key difference there for me was that was where Fur looked like right back to what he was in the summer, He was like tearing apart all the CT defenses. He would just push aggressively. And that's exactly the SK I would like to see face FaZe. Because if you have any problems with your CT setups, especially on a map like Mirage, that's the most obvious one, I think, when you watch Fur play. Fur is going to destroy it, because since he always attacks the middle especially, it just forces you have to instantly be making decisions and know how to play off the other person who's on that site. It's really tough, So I don't know if they could do that for a whole tournament. That's been their problem in the last few ones for SK. But if they can just do that once and against FaZe, that would be a real interesting matchup, I think. Especially because the map pool obviously is pretty good matchup for the two of them, actually. There's not really any specialist ones. Although I will say that FaZe is one of the teams that would, at the moment, be able to punish the fact that SK, for some reason, just lose every Inferno they play for some reason. They seem to have real problems on that map, right? That's the one where all those guys we're talking about, Phelps, actually for himself, are having some issues.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I really like the point that you're making. Like, they don't have to be amazing the whole tournament. They have to be for one match. And if FaZe is the dominating team at the next LAN event, that's going to be an extra motivation that SK hasn't had in a while. Someone being better than them, considered better than them. So and that might even bring SK back to a level in the sense where they're like, if they have a really good match against FaZe or even beat them straight out, right? That's a better way to get your confidence back than killing the all-star team in a way.
Yeah. Plus, what really killed me about New York is like, okay, I don't actually blame the Cloud9 team for how they lost, because like I say, they're still a pretty new team, and obviously they're figuring out like the whole in-game leader issue there and how to use all the different players, because they've all in theory been star players at different points in different teams. That's a hard team to figure out anyway. So okay, that's fine. But it's the fact that Cloud9 and Team Liquid, okay, Team Liquid's now gotten to this level where they're contending and they're learning how to play in these big matches, but they're still young players. They're still a team that hasn't had that much success. So I can understand how teams like that can like break down in a map, It goes really badly. You got superstar players, especially the ones who have bigger reps than you, styling on you, and you just think, that's just not my day, The difference is whether SK and Astralis can win a tournament. I don't think they're going to break down like that in a series. Like, listen, FaZe could beat them, but that's one of the things I think is a strength for both those teams. Like SK, they're not going to be like, oh, we're totally outgunned here. They've still got Fur, they've still got Cold Zero, still got amazing players, who are used to going head to head with all the best players. And then you look at Astralis. I actually think a strength for Astralis, if you spin it the other way, Moses, I think it's a problem that they do play that same style. But the good side of that as well is I think that's why Astralis always did finish top 4. Because even if you were actually playing better than them, because their players sort of don't seem to be as focused on what their individual scores are and how they're doing, they almost have that logic of like, well, it doesn't matter if like this guy's dying here again and again. Like if you execute the tactic, we have a chance to win the round. So I also feel like they don't break mentally in the same way. There's very few times we've seen them get crushed.
Yeah, I mean that kind of style makes it he's still a pretty difficult opponent to put away. Also, I don't know if we have a better team in professional Counter-Strike at the moment of maybe not always winning like them when they're in like 2-on-4s or like a 3-on-5. They might not win all of them, but since they don't focus, even in those situations, they're still focused on team play and instead of individual, some kind of individual play to turn the round on its head. They're really, really good at just getting those 3 important kills to keep the economy lower and force some rebuys out of it. They're so good when they're at like a 1 or 2 man disadvantage at finding a way to get kills and give themselves a chance. So yeah, that's tough. They're going to be a tough one to put away. And let's keep in mind, FaZe has only played Astralis in a best of 1 on LAN, and they haven't even played SK yet. So I mean, that is the intriguing thing. That is going to be like, how do we, when is that going to happen? Because obviously SK is not at ELEAGUE. My question,
and also, by the way, just to throw in one last detail, I realize these are different FaZe squads, but one thing that does carry over is that, like, as you see in every single tournament that they play, one of the things Carrigan always does is try and do like tricky pick bans. Like, he's the guy who always tries to do an unusual ban or an unusual pick. He doesn't just go with the standard, because he doesn't want you to have put all your time into prepping that one map knowing you're going to get it. So I actually feel like the reason I also want to see Astralis play FaZe is because even in their slightly weaker current form, Astralis still has an amazing map pool. Like, they might not be the best on half the maps like they used to, but they can still play nearly all of them. So I feel like they're one of the few teams as well who, if they've really studied FaZe, could figure out at least where they're weak. Because actually FaZe at New York, that's another thing. They only really played something like 4 or 5 maps. I don't think they ever had to play more than that. You know, they just managed to get onto the same map, especially because in the final against Liquid, they managed to stack all of their maps at the front of the best of 5, and they never had to go into the nuke, the train that would have been later on in the series, you know.
Well, I mean, that leads directly into my question, and I was going to say, Zeus, like, let's just say, I know you did this at New York, but let's just say, hypothetically, you guys qualified for ELEAGUE, and you're playing FaZe in the quarterfinals, you're in, like, Envious's spot. How do you ban against this team? Because they've got 4 maps that are 100% win rates. They've got Mirage, Inferno, Cache, Overpass that are 100%. They haven't lost on them yet. I know that this is a very limited. I think they've only played 14 maps on land total. So those 4 maps on land, they're undefeated. Train and Nuke, they haven't won yet. They're 0-2 and 0-1. But I mean, is that what you're going for? But like, how do you ban against this team that just has so many maps that they seem very, very good on at the moment, even early on?
That's complicated. Like, if I'm envious, let's be honest, their map pool isn't great, so I'm kind of fucked, right? It's true. Like, they're gonna have to
Envious
try
is
to
completely fucked because they actually their best map's Cobblestone, which is the ban of FaZe. So no, he means if you were in their position though, what would you do?
If it goes to me, like, they banned Cobblestone, which is a comfortable map for us. I don't think we'd necessarily try to throw a curveball at them and try to go for a nuke or anything like that, because right now we trust in our squad. But if we learned the best thing for us right now, I'm gonna say, right, is being stomped on the way we're in the finals. We saw so many mistakes on that and what we can improve, right? They're not going to be, what are they going to be able to improve on? So I don't think it changes that much in the sense for the veto. You just have to keep a lookout on what they're stabilizing on. Like, even though they have 100% success rate on Overpass, I don't see it as one of their most solid maps of all time, right? Like, stats can be misleading in that sense.
I thought that was a bit shaky, yeah.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's also very early on in their lifeline, right? So you don't even know how accurate necessarily all these maps look.
Inferno, I think, wouldn't have like one map that's 100% I'm not scared of, but I'd watch out for in FaZe is Mirage, because they just play that like simple as fuck, and they just everything they do is very fundamentally correct, which you wouldn't expect for a team that has all that firepower. We're not even getting to the names of these players and what they can do, and they're playing, I think, very correctly from everything I watched on them there. So that's a map that I think teams have to watch out for them.
Well, the funny thing is, if you look at the Mirage one, actually pretty much all the players in their team have like pretty good history on Mirage. Like, obviously Guardian comes from Navi, who just played it forever. Olaf Meister, actually that was one of the best maps at the end of his Fnatic. This last lineup that they had, where it was the classic team, but in 2017, that was actually one of the maps that he was still very good on. He had a lot of good times there. Obviously the old FaZe was good on Mirage as well. So I actually think that's, if you want to put something in the column of how they could dominate, actually Mirage is one of them, because at the moment, literally no one bans Mirage now. Even fucking Nip and G2 play it now. So at this point, if everyone is willing to let Mirage through, that can be your home map if you want. You can just be picking that all day. So I think that's a positive for the FaZe team. I would put that as a very positive sign, because everyone's going to be willing to play them on it, you know.
Yeah,
it helps. It helps when you have like Nico and Connector, Guardian in middle with an op, and you have, I think, who plays Cat for them? Is it Olaf?
It's Olaf Meister.
Like, that's
just
just
a pretty
like
good trio.
That's such a retarded.
That's the triangle of death right there, right? How do you go up mid?
Oh, fuck,
pretty good. Yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say let's think of like the weaknesses of this team at the moment, because I know we can talk all day about how strong they looked and everything, but just on a level of weaknesses, I think the obvious one that glares out is really being aggressive on your T side, really trying to pressure bomb sites, maybe not like hit them so quickly, but see if this defense can hold up, see if they have got that cohesion. If going into ELEAGUE, have they actually, worked and done the theory crafting enough on their CT sides to not just be like, Nico on Inferno in the B bomb site, just, one tapping all of you as you enter in. Are they going to have like a pop flash setup of some sort? Like, if you do some kind of a contact play, are they going to be ready for with a crossfire? I think right now that, if you're playing FaZe, you have to think that your T side needs to put up a decent amount of rounds, because their T side is going to be so dangerous.
That's also the reason. Yeah, okay, come on.
No, just on the T side, I think that there's two ways that people should focus on playing or could focus, right? You always have to mix it up, so you can't be having only full strat set little pieces of executes or contact plays to get onto them because they'll catch on very quick. Kerrigan is a very capable in-game leader in that sense, and he can see patterns. But like if you're defaulting, like I said, the fact that they're going so aggressive, right, and they're being ballsy as fuck. So sometimes they'll get the kill, and instead of falling back, they'll hang around to get the second. I think that's where teams are going to start to punish them. It's not necessarily going to be on the first kill; it's going to be on the trade back. Yeah. And once things are traded back, and you have more options on the map, then a team with less chemistry and less rotation works, and who don't have the reactions already planned out from playing these maps so many times that these things get. Just in a team sense, I think that's when they're going to be punished more than even so on maps or anything like that. Because those other maps, yeah, they may be worse for them, but they might even be better on those maps and we don't even know, right?
Sure. Well, that's also another team where we haven't brought them up yet because we went with the classic picks. But I think one that people will... Here's the thing. People will assume I'm like blowing them up here, but I actually think that the North team will be a really interesting team if they were to play against FaZe, because I actually think one of the things I like about North since they added in Valde is they look even more solid now. Like I always thought they had a good T-side anyway, but he just looks like a really solid player they've added into the mix. Obviously, Comfy is absolutely bonkers whenever he enters any site. So I feel like that's a really good team to have the formula for what exactly you're talking about here. First of all, Config can go head-to-head with anyone as an entry player and just get the kill. I realize he doesn't always play that spot for North at the moment. But then, if you want a team that's got like really good skill level, man for man, going down the line, they have a bunch of maps that they're pretty good on. They've got a good T-side. They've got a very regimented T-side. I feel like that would be a decent enough matchup.
Yeah, I want to see Gambit, to be honest. Okay. Gambit is... they beat them at Malmo, but I'm not taking that so much into consideration. But I think when I watch Gambit play, I think that they don't play so 100% solid. Everyone used to say that zews just put them into making 100% just trying to be correct, and that's tie you like that. But I see a lot of like freedom potential in their team when creating plays. Like Fitch is a player that's catching my eye because he's just so interesting.
He was unreal in Malmo.
Yeah, and he's just like, it's such a unique style that he plays. It's not conventional at all, but there are players out there like Fur and Config who have those non-traditional styles and just kill it, right? And I think that it's very rare to find these kind of players, but every team that has this kind of player can destabilize other teams, and it doesn't matter if it's FaZe, Astralis, or whatever it is, because when you fall from go farther away from the expected, that's when the human mind gets funny, right? And people start overthinking. FaZe is a team, like you said, they haven't been challenged. So when someone creates true chaos in their setups or what they're planning, because so far they've been running everything according to their plan. Once things get away from what they expect, that's going to be very interesting. I think Gambit can do that pretty well.
Yeah, that's also why I want to see them play the full maps. Like, for example, I want to see what their train's like, because if you're playing CT side outside on train, and even if you get the first kill, you get immediately traded on, that site now becomes twice as hard to defend, when you've got four people rolling onto the two people you've got left there. That's an obvious mismatch. Like, that's a really tough map to play. I've always felt like the CT side of that map in the rework of train is like, there's a reason why teams were either very good on T-side or they just didn't like train. It's a really tough map to play because I feel like that because that outside site has like a million angles, there is no perfect way to play it. So you have to be at a very, very high level and you have to constantly be changing things. Otherwise, people will figure out your defensive setups, So the old FaZe, admittedly, was very good at that, but half that team's gone. This is a new squad. You've got people like Olafmeister in there now where you're going to have to use him totally differently. So yeah, I certainly think that the CT side's the obvious place I could see them having struggles. That's also why the other team, the last team I want to bring up as a potential, like, how would this team match up? I want to see G2 play them. Because G2, again, is a team where they've got plenty of skill in that team. They shouldn't be intimidated in that sense, I mean, they've been playing against half these players their entire careers anyway, They're not going to be like, oh, holy shit, Guardian's going off. Like, well, no, these people have been at the top for a long time in CS. So again, I don't really see them, like, mentally breaking in that sense. And also, G2's just looked really strong recently.
Yeah, G2 is something that people aren't talking about that much, but they can be scared. It's so inconsistent with them. I never know what to expect. It's hard, right? Because go just why?
No, it's the inconsistency. Keep going. It's just you never get that fact that you can rely on their previous performance, can you?
And with them, I don't know if my read on this is entirely correct, but I feel like they play a different style against every team, right? I don't think that they are playing their game. I think that it looks like they're almost always playing against other teams, in a sense, because you watch them play against SK, it's completely different than they play Astralis, and that's why it was funny last season, because it had that triangle where SK would beat Astralis, G2 would beat SK, and Astralis would beat G2, right? It was kind of because they mix up the style. So it's hard to say what they're going to play like against FaZe, but if they try to play it like they do in SK, not giving them respect, that's going to be the true clash of the super teams that people talked about in Cloud9 versus FaZe in New York. That would be the most interesting deathmatch server in the world if it goes what people are expecting.
Yeah. I also think, actually, one of the reasons I really want to see G2 play them is because G2's actually been in this like return to form they had after the major. Their Inferno looks really good. Like, I think they're one of the better teams on that map, because if you notice, what's bizarre is all the teams in the summer who were good on Inferno have just like died away. Like SK, Astralis actually have had a bunch of issues on that map, and you've seen all these top teams, suddenly Inferno doesn't work for them anymore. So I'm interested to see, because obviously it's like a strength of FaZe's right now as well. I want to see teams who can actually play them on that map though. Here's the question though. At New York, in theory, Nico was the MVP, like he was the best player. Admittedly, they all had a very good stats. Like actually, Rain had bananas stats at that tournament. But in the final, obviously, Nico was shining the most, so I understand why people gave him the nod. Like, do you actually think this is a team where if they do dominate, though, it will be like they dominate and Nico's like the best player? Or will it be like from tournament to tournament, it's one guy this tournament, one the next tournament? What's your feeling in that sense?
I think that's one of the strengths of this team, is that I don't think there has to be a consistent. I think Nico is always going to be up there, but I mean, especially now, I think they have players, especially if Olaf, just chimes in the way he does and gets better. I mean, they just have that's the benefit of having these 4-star players, is if they all buy into this kind of team system and don't really give a fuck who this quote unquote star player, like lead star, I guess you'd call it. They just have like a situation where Nico can have an off day and then Rain's the star, or Nico and Rain aren't having a great game and Olaf's the star, or Guardian's getting all the kills, so none of them have a chance to. And they have so many people that can like slide in and carry games that you don't ever on an individual basis necessarily always have to be at your peak. It's not like, Nico and Mouse Sports. It's not like Olaf and Fnatic. It's not like Guardian and early Navi. You have a system where, or you at least have some kind of, you have a backup. So when you have an off game, you've got 3 other guys who could just carry you through a map. And it doesn't even always have to be a whole map. Maybe it's just a half of a map. Maybe it's just you start out slow and Guardian carries the shoulder for 15 rounds, and then second half comes up and Nico clicks in. So I mean, that's one of the tough parts about this, is it's not just like a team where there are certain teams where you can just shut down one player. If Kenny S gets shut down on G2, all of a sudden that's a much less scary team. If you go over to Astralis, we saw what happened when Mo was able to shut down Device on the op with Overpass. They were just a completely different look. Like, I don't think, it doesn't seem at the moment, and it's still early, fair play, but it doesn't seem like they have like one linchpin in this team that has to perform for this team to have success.
Yeah, I'll agree with most of that. It's like it's hard to say a star, but I'm going to actually call out that Nico will be the star in this for many factors, just at least in the beginning, because he has those flashy plays and he's in a really good moment. I think life cannot be better for him in the sense of he's finally getting everything he wants. So he has that motivation right now. Yeah. But with all that talent in the team, I think it falls very well into that. It's like you're not necessarily going to have a star for the whole game. It's going to be 3 rounds. Nico is insane. Then Guardian gets the most important kills on the other one. And if that isn't working, you have Rain, who doesn't need to show up, but when he does, he just hard carries by himself as well because he's insane. And Olaf, incredible as it is, he's like more towards the middle of the pack. He's, from what I'm seeing, he's been doing a lot of like helping the team in the support side, because you can't all be fragging in that sense. And he's taking it amazing. And even then, he'll have some matches like against an IP. I think he went 37-10, something like that. It's like insane, right? So for short term, at least until they get into their goals, what they want, like maybe a major or something like that's going to go. For the long term, that's a different thing. If all these star players can keep their egos in checks the whole time, right now it's great. But once you maintain yourself at the top for a very long time, and if it goes that way, then it's then I don't know if it's going to maintain itself.
This is the classic. This is like the example that I think we all have to start giving this team of when it's just like, when we always say that line, there's only so many kills to go around. I think this is like the classic example. Like you were going to see star performances out of guys like Nico, and they won't even have close to like the top number of kills. So like hold their bomb site amazingly, and they'll do their job when the action comes to them. But the fact that they just have all these players, like I think, to Zeus's point, all these players kind of holding their ego in check and not really caring who's the star player. I think it helps that, for instance, Guardian, towards the end of his time in Na'Vi, just had no success whatsoever on an individual or a team level. I think it helps that Guardian and Fnatic never got back to that point again, that peak again, where they were dangerous. Definitely Rain is. He always strikes me as one of the more humble players that I talk to at events. And he went through his own struggles in FaZe, throughout the different iterations of this lineup for the past 2 years. So I think they have kind of a perfect storm where I think they're going to have plenty of time where everyone is going to be willing to just chase after the trophy and not really give a fuck who's getting all the kills. But I mean, Guardian hasn't had a negative rating since I think that's ESO in New York, the group stage game against NIP. No, that's Malmo. Excuse me. I think. Yeah, that's Malmo. But that's insane. Guardian's been hitting this crazy form, and this is all on land. But when you have someone like that, it's just like we're seeing a resurgence out of all these players where it feels like they're finally comfortable and confident in the team they're playing with. So everyone is playing better.
Yeah. I just hopping on Guardian for a bit. I think he's don't get me wrong, because Olaf was just an insane bonus is what I'm going to say, but in no way is Olaf ever a bonus. He's phenomenal. But Guardian just changed this roster up. When you look at it from a tactical side, he just I don't even think Alu was doing a bad job before. It's just Guardian has been killing it. He's been killing it, right? It's really nuts. I think that this new face that we're seeing is large of it due to Guardian's style. He's a player that knows how to get the kills when it's needed. He knows how to hold it down. He seems to be in perfect form again, coming out of Na'Vi, like you said, and he's just stepping it up. So props to him on that one.
And I think that's the key. I said this when Alu got replaced. It's not that Alu did bad. He was doing his job, but getting Guardian just allows you as an in-game leader so many different options. He has such a different play style. And it's that sense where he can give you the little bit of extra that Alu couldn't give you as much or as consistently. He can go be that aggressor and find the one kill. He can, change around, on its head, on the terror side. I thought Alu was a great CT operator. I thought on the T side is where you kind of notice some deficiencies in him. But Guardian is that guy who can just go out on T sides and just go find you that one pick. And that's the most important thing for an opera to be able to get.
The problem with Guardian, though, is this is one of the areas where, as someone who's essentially just a spectator, I love the fact that CS goes all year round. I never have to usually wait reasonably more than about 3 weeks to watch a big tournament. Yeah, we have the player breaks a month, but aside from that, there's always going to be a big tournament coming up. And in theory, because you never know which you'll qualify for, teams are trying to get to all the tournaments. They're trying to get invited or get through the qualifier. So the downside of that is, unlike every single traditional sport, there isn't really a proper off season. That player break is only a month. In fact, it's even slightly less than a month. And that's not that long. In traditional sports, the off-season is 3 months long. You get a proper period of time to either recover from injury or change team or whatever. And so the downside is, I think Guardian is a perfect example of what not having an off-season does. Because, listen, I don't know how much he would say publicly about this, but, you heard what Simple said and what some of the other people in Na'Vi said, and these are things I'd heard behind the scenes, that in Na'Vi, there was a legit almost 1 year period where he had no motivation. He wasn't putting in extra hours to be the best he could be. And then within the team, he felt like things weren't set up correctly. So he also kind of lost his morale went down, He himself didn't play like he thought he was the best player anymore. Now, it's easy to just be this is bullshit. That's unprofessional. You got to do the best for your teammates. But these are human. If you've played CS for 10 years straight and every year you're constantly playing, when you get into a period like that where your morale's down or it's just not working for you, you're not just going to say, right, I retire and I'll come back in 2 years. We don't have an off-season period like that where you can recover, because in traditional sports like the NBA or whatever, at the end of the season, you go away for a few months, you take time off, then you decide, right, how am I going to come in the next season? And sometimes what's even more crazy in traditional sports is you don't even have to be like hit the ground running at the beginning of the season. You can kind of work yourself into form during the season, you know, like right, the first part, I'm starting to build up again. And then as long as by the playoffs come, I'm really good and my team gets in, fine, that's okay. Because I've seen this happen now with a few different players. Like the same thing happened to Kenny S last year. I sometimes would talk to Kenny S and be like, you know, on this map here, why aren't you like demanding the AWP? Why don't you just let them do all the ecos? And he would tell them, how can I demand the AWP? I'm not practicing very much. And I'll be like, what the fuck? You don't even play? And then he would be like, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, you know, like I don't feel it at the moment. I'm not into it. And so as much as in that moment, I want to be like, come on, this is bullshit. You know, you got to get it all, turn it all around. I can't really blame him. Again, he's been playing for like, 7-8 years in a row constantly. So unfortunately, You're just going to see this in with the way the current esport is set up. Like, it's not like Guardian literally went to the fountain of youth and, you know, recovered all his own form. If I had to guess, things were so bad at the end of Na'Vi that yes, even though I don't agree with it, I'm not someone myself who would just take time off. He was kind of just coasting, and now he's fully motivated because he's in a team that can win all these titles, which actually he didn't win very often in Na'Vi, if you remember.
I mean, just to piggyback on that, it's not just those two players as well. We hear those stories, you know, out of players' mouths across the entire scene. Yeah.
You know, it's more understandable because it seems bizarre to a fan, right? Think about what I was saying when I said to Kenny S there. That's because to me, if I'm saying it to Kenny S, I'm thinking, dude, you could be like the best AWPer in the world. Think about what that would change in your team. But if his team's in a really bad spot and he's been playing all this time and he just wants to chill out for a while, he's thinking from a different perspective, you know.
Well, that's also like the hidden. One of maybe not so hidden actually, but one of the positive things of like a roster change in this sense, where when you make a change and you go to a new team, like you are automatically like refreshed to a certain degree. It's like an automatic, like little mini.
Holy shit! Yeah.
Did you just die?
Shit.
Yeah. All right.
Just knocked my water glass off.
It's like a little
mini,
like. Oh, I didn't know we were gonna wait for Duncan. But yeah, fuck that guy. I was going to say those roster changes, it is like a little bit of a mini like boost in your motivation. Like when you just join a new team, it's not like necessarily long lasting, but knowing that you're in a new team and knowing that you have to like pay extra attention and you have to work that little bit harder to get the cohesion and kind of understand the plays and what tactics you're going to call and everything like that. That's like a natural increase in your focus and your motivation to become better because you want to make this team work. So I think that's a little bit of what we've seen here in FaZe, and it'll just be interesting to see how long that keeps up, if he can stay at this level for how long.
The famous honeymoon period, right? They're experiencing that in general as a team, and for Guardian, it's a breath of fresh air. But I think that's why it's funny in CSGO. It's kind of cyclical, right? Cyclical, I don't know, English,
cyclical,
whatever. Yeah, it's kind of like history repeats itself because you can tell in so many different players in so many different eras and how players just handle change. And why I think it's funny then we see teams like VP, I think that they were really good at being able to peak sometimes, right? Right now it's of course not going their way, but throughout history they were really good at that, like trying to keep their energy levels contained in a sense. And then when it came time for those larger tournaments for a major or for something in their home country, then they put in the extra hours of work and get back on top form and everything like that. And like Duncan was saying, it's really hard with the CS season the way it is, and it's hard to maintain, but at the same time it's something everybody is going through, so you don't know who's going to be doing well at what time for how long. But with this team, especially with Guardian, I think that like with all the examples you guys pointed out, that he just came from a new team, with Olaf just coming from a different situation but kind of similar in its sense about used to be really on top and not anymore, right? So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to last for a little while, at least until they feel that they've achieved everything they've done. Maybe it takes until the next player break or something like that, because every time people have breaks, people forget this as well. Like, they are humans. And breaks is when people's mind, when you're in a team mentality, always traveling together and everything like that, you start thinking like you're the same people, let's say, right? You start thinking like brothers. But once you take time apart, people think differently just because that's how life goes. And I think that's normally when you see people have these crazy comebacks or slumps. It's always after breaks. I see it in SK a lot. You can see it in Immortals. You're going to see it in FaZe and everyone like that. It's really interesting. But for Guardian, let's see.
I also think as well that like it's really, really tough to know what can happen in FaZe because no one's ever attempted a team like this before. Like even in the past, when you hear people, like when people say that normal rule, which I do consider a rule generally, like you can't have too many stars, you can't have too many people who are used to being like the focal point and getting all the frags. That's true. But then again, that's because usually we mean like, maybe you can get like the top 2 or 3 players. There's no one's ever made a team like this where a bunch of players were like. Okay, I get Olafmeister and Guardian aren't at like their peak forms, but just the concept of having those 2 players and Nico in one team still is just absolutely ridiculous. Like, no one could have done that in the history of the game. Like, for example, okay, remember that Fnatic team that was the one that was at the end of 2015, early 2016, the one that had Dennis, right? That had a lot of talent in it. But even so, that still had players in who could play different roles, and some of them who didn't need to be the star player, like Flusher, Crims. They absolutely don't need to be the superstar player. It's not like the team was like Olafmeister, Dennis, Get Right, Forest. It wasn't that. That's what FaZe is, though. So the problem is, in a way, this is kind of like what I felt at New York. Part of the reason why I just didn't believe in the final they were going to smash Team Liquid was because I thought, come on, there's no way. It almost doesn't make sense if you can play Counter-Strike like this and it can work every map. Like, what have they just broken the Counter-Strike game? Like, is it just over for everyone? So I still don't really feel like that's the case. I think that was just an amazing one-off, and maybe that's how it'll go. Like, maybe they'll have like one tournament like that, then 3 tournaments later they'll do it again. But I don't feel like you can do that continuously. But one thing I have to say is, they can certainly do things that maybe no team's ever done, because no one's ever made a ridiculous lineup like this before. Maybe it can work more than you imagine it should be able to.
They make all of our other teams that we've labeled super teams, they make them look like just fucking normal lineups. That's what's scary about this team.
I just, since I hope to God they don't maintain this level, it's just as simple as that, or else everyone's going to be fighting for second place because at that level that we're playing, right? I'm with Duncan on this. I don't like. I think that the honeymoon and the drive to win the tournament also brought them to level. I think it's a one-off, right? It's to that level. It doesn't mean they won't be fighting for titles or anything like that. It's just that dominant fashion. There's no way you can maintain that level. Even like you said, Fnatic and Navi, Astralis, SK, all during their times, they tried to maintain it to a level, but again, they were not in uncharted waters, right? It wasn't a full superstar team where it's the main names basically everywhere. Yeah. So maybe they prove us wrong, but I think it's going to fall into the human history where people get comfortable and roles change, and when people adapt to them as well. Like I said, the fact that they are such set roles in a sense, right? Some are more malleable than others, but you can never take Guardian away from the op. You can never take Kerrigan away from the in-game leading in that sense. It also makes them vulnerable in a sense to when people do catch on, how will their adaptability be? Like, will they be able to renew themselves constantly? I don't know. We can't know with that much potential. You'd think maybe yes, if someone's going to prove us wrong and change history, it would be a team with this much. But we can't say it. Right? What about next season? Is this a team that's going to last forever? Right? Like not forever, of course, but in its sense, be a team that creates a true 2-year era. Let's say that's hard already in Counter-Strike as it is to maintain a lineup for 2 years, right? And where do you step from here? Like, are they going to get Cold Zero next? Is like what's going to go on?
I mean, here's my question though. If you're a team, when you say FaZe is going to have to adapt when teams start looking into them, is like flat out just for this next event, perhaps just for the E-League playoffs. What can teams even get from New York to like know how to play against them? Because if you watch those demos and every single win is a 16-5, except for the one map against you guys, you're just watching those demos and you're just like, oh, they just killed everyone that walked into their. That's literally what they did all through New York. So what do you find that is like this is how we're going to force them to adapt? Like, because for a team that has such good individual players, that gives them the freedom to make individual plays when they feel it's necessary. Like, that was the strength of that old Fnatic, the dominant Fnatic lineups, was how do you counter a team that isn't really doing anything like that's logical on a team scale. It's kind of just they're making their own individual plays across the map and then just winning in the situationals.
So again, like I said, there are many different ways that you can try to counter it, right? The most important one, in my view, is to have a better foundation than they do. So teams that have a lineup for a longer time, they can have more foundation-style plays and where they're just playing off each other and in a general game sense. If people were to look at that dominant performance, no one's going to expect them to show up at that level at every tournament. So you kind of hope for worse. And if they are a little bit worse, they'll be able to lose some aim duels when people are actually waiting for them to make these different kind of pushes, or when they're giving these aim duels because they are so confident. So if they start losing some of those, then you open space in the map and then you can work defaults. If that doesn't work, like I said, in a foundation, you can have some set strategies where, hell, you can get really complex on some of these, and it's basically creating chaos, right? So yeah, they might be good in chaos, in a chaos strat where you're just basically burning everything and flashing everything. You will have the upper hand because you know what's mollied off and what's everything like that. And where you should be in theory pushing these players to in the open, right? So you can catch them in the one-off to get them blind and everything like that. And that's how I started countering. Then everything else is going to come reactionary from the game because we still haven't seen a FaZe who isn't completely heads-on bashing people, right? Once they fall back, then you're going to have to adapt to what they do next. But if somebody beats them in their first part, maybe they win the tournament with their fallback. But then people will know what they do when they're in your face and when they're falling back. And for the tournament after that, they'll have adapted.
That's why I really want to see, and obviously it can only happen in the final in E-League because we're on different sides of the brackets, but I would actually really like to see Astralis play FaZe. Because even though some of the Astralis players individually aren't really at the form they were earlier in the year when they were the number one team, I think they're the best team at that still. Like having a slow T side where when you molly this position and then you flash another area, it's like your players always are looking in the right area because they understand where is flashed off, where is mollied off, where is smoked. And so I think they're the best at sort of funneling the CTs into the area where they're looking and being able to not have to do... Like, this is one of those areas where I always get a bit mad at people who are like casual fans, because you know if anyone ever runs out as a terrorist and there's a person sitting in a really weird angle and he gets shot in the back of the head, right? Fans will just be like, why didn't he check that angle? It's like, well, depending on the execute, sometimes like it's not his job to check that angle. Like he thinks that's clear because the other guy was supposed to be looking at that, or there was supposed to have been a flash went off there, so no one could be there, right? Normal teams, if you have to check everything, it takes you so much longer, and also then you set up for people in normal positions to kill you. So I feel like Astralis, in theory, has a good setup for that. Their problem, obviously, is at the moment, the area that they don't match up that well with FaZe is Astralis' firepower, I think, is what can be a bit lackluster the last few tournaments, and so that's where you worry that FaZe obviously is coming with all the firepower at the moment.
Yeah, I agree with you. And just to reiterate myself as well, it's not like FaZe haven't played back. Like, even if you watch that Inferno match where they were doing 15-0 on us, like Nico would get the kills on Banana and he would fall back into side. So they were playing smart Counter-Strike as well. It's not like, but they're normally in your face up front, right? So people are going to have to focus at least on that part, I think, early on against them.
Sure. I also think as well, another aspect of the scene that can change that people aren't figuring out is that, okay, right now, yeah, Na'Vi is in really bad shape, and Cloud9 hasn't really figured it out yet, you know, how to make all those players work, and obviously they have a bunch of good players who definitely could be a good team. NIP just doesn't get to a lot of these big tournaments. I feel like one of the factors that makes history really hard to predict is that you never know which of these teams is going to get it together. Like if Na'Vi actually makes a roster move or they fix something in their team, that adds another dangerous team in the mix now. And now, depending on what maps they play, they're a good matchup for a certain team. Or actually outright, if you can just put Simple against someone, he's going to kill a lot of people in the game, you know. But he has to have a team that's good enough to win the match, obviously. So I think the fact that it's such a confusing period, like at the moment, okay, this is the tough part. At the moment, it's one of the only times I've seen in history where the rankings mean almost nothing. Because, for example, there's actually no logic by which you can take SK off the number one in the rankings. I was doing my rankings the other day. At the moment, they still have all the big placings. They still have a bunch of really good series wins and stuff. So it's going to be a few months until someone can rack up the placings and the wins to be able to topple them. But they're clearly not the number one team if they play today. You know, like if you make them play a match now, no one's going to pick them to be the favorite. So it's actually a very uncertain time. So one thing we do know is that won't just continue forever. It won't just be mad uncertainty and no real clear number one. You know, it will solidify. And a bunch of these teams we're talking about already, like G2, okay, they've had their lineup a long time, but the North lineup that I've referenced, they've only played like 2 tournaments, you know, so, well, 3, I guess, with E-League as well. So, again, you still, for all we know, they can still improve. They still have a trajectory upwards, I think.
Yeah, I think North, I think even probably more so than the FaZe editions, I think that pickup of Valdi was like the coolest, probably the most impactful, the best one of the offseason, you could even say. I think North looks very, very scary at the moment. That's just going to be the question with them as well, because once you get past, I think, like Config and Valdi, like, do they have someone who can still, you know, that can match up with the guys on FaZe? That's what scares me most about them. So they're going to have like a really, really good game. I think they'll need Cajun to step up in that kind of a situation, which I don't see too frequently anymore these days.
Yeah, about the rankings, I think you're completely right. Because people who say SK shouldn't be at the top, and I've read a lot of crazy fans just commenting this, you don't say it off one tournament. You have to go, and even the ones where ones where they were doing badly, they lost in semifinals in Malmo and semifinals in New York. It's not like they're doing bad at all. They should still be racking up points for those things. It's a consistency thing, right? But on everyone else, it's kind of hard to predict. Like us, G2, the G2 is on and off. North, Gambit, Na'Vi. If Na'Vi changes something, because they don't look like they're going in that sense. Those are 4 teams that you don't know what to expect, and like CS is so funny in that sense. So maybe we lose to FaZe, but maybe we're able to take down Astralis and SK, and then SK takes them down, right? A lot of these things influence the rankings, and it just makes it total nonsense in the point to an extent, right? I think not just because you're here. I think yours gets not because you put us in 5th. Thanks for that. But yours makes the most of both worlds, because you can't only go on history and you have to go a little bit by momentum. But right now we're in just such a crazy point where maybe 1 through 8 you have no idea what the hell is going on. Like maybe you get closer to knowing what 1 through 4 should be, but at any point the 4 through 8 teams could be on 4th spot, or someone from the 1st can fall down to 5th. It's just really crazy.
Well, actually, that's one of the teams, obviously, we didn't reference, Moses, is Team Liquid, because it still feels like they only just got to this position where they potentially can win tournaments. But you look at the results recently, this is what's bizarre, right? I remember when we did the By the Numbers show, Richard actually isn't really up on Team Liquid that much. You know, like he actually thought that when they lost to SK at E-League, that maybe he didn't watch all the other games, I don't know. But he thought that was like, oh, you know, the people overhyped them. But what's bizarre is the way they lost, I actually thought was still pretty good. Like, they still were really competitive. They win all the games. They had loads of chances to do well. They actually were playing their style. It wasn't just like, you know, one player went crazy in the game. It was all looking really good to me. So, yeah, I'm not going to say that Team Liquid's going to be the number 1 team or whatever, but I would certainly like to see them play FaZe again in like a proper best of 3. It's just, my problem with Team Liquid at the moment is I feel like they don't have to change the roster, but when one of your superstar players is 17 years old, which Twists is only 17, people have to realize, he's still very, very fresh, you know. So the difference is he might keep progressing and continue to be really good, or maybe go to another level even higher, and therefore that can be a factor that can make Team Liquid the champions or beat teams like FaZe. The problem is, though, you contrast them with people like, if like Nico's your best player, he's kind of battle tested, you know. You know every game in and out. He knows what's going to happen when he plays any team or in any kind of situation. He's been in finals, he's been in semi-finals, he's been on stage, he's played every really good player. So you can rely on that. Whereas there's still a little bit of uncertainty for a team like when they're going against the likes of FaZe for me.
I mean, and he's still young, so this is that stage where he's getting battle tested, right? He's had some of the failures and he's had to work through them, and I think the positive thing when you look at that is, you know, we all saw the tweet after Greece, which was just like, fucking hell, dude, but he bounced back from that and he still plays great. We saw him play under the most insane pressure at the major qualifier against Flipside, winning like miraculous 1-on-3s, helping it go down to the wire. He did all of those things, so that's always positive to see him bouncing back. I think the one scary
good old
part.
Moses, like, you know, literally so much material you could go with, like great performance in Mykonos, great at ES on the Okies. Like, remember that major qualifier? You remember the Flipside game?
You had to bring that up, didn't you? You egg-shaped motherfucker.
There we go.
Corral.
Okay, the Brazilian came out there. Okay, I like that.
I mean, listen, to be fair, that's such an impressive performance. I know it's heartbreaking, but like to have him in that situation doing that is really good to see. I think the biggest weakness and fear I have for Liquid at the moment, and it's an old one and it's a classic, but it's still there, is this just seems at times like the team just feels like it doesn't have the same level of impact or danger when JDM's having a bad game or when JDM's struggling to get involved. I think that AWPer is still like a big key for this team. And we saw at times, you know, even in New York, if you look at it, JDM had a phenomenal tournament up until the finals where he had a couple struggles in some of those maps. Now, fair point. FaZe was just firing on all cylinders and bodied everyone, like we've said a number of times. But when you don't have someone like JDM, you know, helping you out and being effective with the AWP, you lose a big piece because he's so impactful when he's having a good game.
Yeah. So on Twist first. So Twist, my personal opinion, but after I've seen this kid's work ethic, the way he's been handling the pressure, like you said, major qualifier was one kind of pressure that's completely different. He's 17 and he's already made 2 grand finals. Yeah, Mykonos, I love that tournament, love those people, but it wasn't as big as New York. But New York, we went through the opposition and it was a main stage. It was a main event, let's say, right, with all the quality content there. So yeah, it's normal not to. I mean, to adapt to finals. Like I always use this, but in LG, it took us five finals to win one. And the fact that he's doing this at 17 years old, I don't think Nico even got those chances. So maybe he's getting a little bit of battle training earlier on right now. So for what he's going to become, my personal opinion, he will be the best player in NA, if not the world, with time. How much time, I don't know, but it's if he keeps going, because it's simple. His work ethic, he plays 14 to 15 hours of Counter-Strike every day. And he's involved in it in a sense that is like, you can tell that his only goal is to be the best team in the world. He reminds me a lot of Cold Zero in that sense. Yeah, his skill is phenomenal, but he's not thinking about what he's doing, right? He's thinking a lot in the team, and he's still adapting to a lot of things. And he was changed in his role very recently after the break, and he's more of the pack now and entering a lot as well. And sometimes, and he's still getting those kills because of his stuff. I have a
question about that then, actually, because that is the thing that was really startling to me. Is what, like, so actually, I'll reference what Moses said there. When you think back before they made this in-game leader change to Nitro, when they were, for example, at like the major qualifier, one of the things about Twists at that time where I wasn't like super all in on him is because the kills would be nuts. Like, he'd be like, wow, what sick first bullet aim, what great CZ kills. But he did play, like, here's the thing, the rep that he had in the NA scene was that he was a beta. And I have to say, when I watched those games, he did look like he baited sometimes. Not necessarily like maliciously, you know, but as in, that's just how he thought he had to play to get his kills, right? But when I've seen him in this team now, he is part of the entry pack, you know. It seems like his mentality is shifted completely. So, is he actually like? How much of that is like him? Like, do you have to direct him as to what he's going to do in that sense? Is he adjusted to that as his new playing style?
So that's stuff. Like, it's a little bit of him and a little bit of what the team wanted. We just talked it out, and different players' opinions came out on what they wanted to do. Like, Peter really wanted to go back into the lurking role because he thought he was really good at that. But for him to be doing that, he couldn't in-game lead, and that's a really big quality that he has. So we adapted. So we have this new style where Nitro calls are very early on in the round, mid calls, but Peter has complete freedom to do it, and he does it a lot, right? So it's kind of a 1-2 thing going on in the game leading. For Russell, we all felt the same way, right? On his T sides, he was just being too passive in a lurking position. He wasn't that guy who was getting, like, opening up the side for us on the other side of the map. But despite his insane skill, it's just he was waiting for us to take action on the other side when he needed to take some himself. So we put him more together towards the pack just to utilize his insane aim and everything like that. And he's been doing amazingly like that, right? And he still has some of those qualities. I wouldn't say it baiting, because if you look at Cold Zero, a lot of people can call his style baiting as well. But like, on CT side against Astralis, right, on their Mirage, we killed them because they were trying to hit us on A every time, and Russell was passive. He just let everyone use all their utilities. He's like, okay, guys, now use all your shit. And now we just start taking sides with Molotov and Smoke, and Astralis would be out. And so he still has that quality in him. It's just on the T side, since he does have such nutty aim and like positioning, he just can snap from one to the second player very good. It's so good to have him either there as the first one, if we're just walking up and contacting, or if we're doing a full execute, have them as that trader personality who's just there and get a person who we know will get those kills for. It's very rare for something to escape an easy kill.
The thing is, though, Moses, the part that does tilt me a bit, this is just like how you can always find something to complain about. So Team Liquid's doing really well now. All the pieces look great. But this does tilt me because think about how often even people who are Nitro's teammates were like, you should be the entry player. And he was like, nah, listen, man, I don't know about that. Like, you know, maybe I'm better as a lurker, or I'm going to be the secondary op now, or whatever, you know, like. This guy has always looked fantastic when he's the entry guy. Not in terms, by the way, not in terms of stats necessarily, but the impact he has. Like, he's so good at that, just pushing in aggressively, sometimes brute force in a spot. He's just fantastic at it. Why is he spent half his career trying not to do it?
I think a lot falls before on not having the pieces by him, or at least not confidence in the pieces that were by him, if I'm like completely honest. Because the moment he felt that, okay, my pure firepower, because Nitro can be nuts in his skill. That's what deep down, he's changing around. He's an insane entry fragger when he chooses to be so, but he has like a lot of skill to be that star player, even maybe not to the level of a closer like ELEAGUE at times, or doing something. But when he was on, he would carry matches by himself as well. So I think that now he has the full confidence in it. Russell goes in sometimes, but he thinks it's better for the team for him to go first. So once that mentality changes, everything else is easier to follow until that mentality is there. I don't think it's as much as it was before that wishy-washy, I want to do everything.
No, but I mean that was an extremely tilting period of his career when he was like, no, I want to be the lurker now. Oh no, I'll be the second op. Oh no, I'll try in game leading for a little bit, and it just like rotated. He never like picked one, especially because the big strength of Liquid early on before you came along, before Hiko even joined the team, was that combination of Nitro and ELEAGUE being the aggressors onto bomb sites was like the winning recipe for Liquid. The one thing that Nitro has that it's actually surprising that like there's not a whole lot of pro players that come to mind that I can think of have this kind of tendency, but Nitro has like a really, really good understanding when he entries of just which one kill is the most important to get. Like which player does he like become that homing missile towards? If he has to pick between two players, he'll take the one that allows his teammates to swing at a previously unavailable angle. Instead of like trying to get the first one he sees, he will zone in on like a one guy that just clears the path for the rest of the team, even if it knowingly puts him in a position where he's just going to die, or where likely he gets traded, whatever it might be. But that's a very important skill and game sense to have when you're an entry fragger, of being able to put yourself in danger to get that one most impactful thing. And I think that was one of his big strengths. And yeah, it is. I mean, even as an in-game leader, I think the funny thing is he's tried it in the past. I'm wondering why now? Why now is it all of a sudden looking effective? Because the first time around, he gave it up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it falls back to one, having people by himself. Like the fact that he knows now that people will give their input, and he has Peter there something to fall back on in case he's not feeling it. And the best CS:GO players in the world, I've seen ColdZero tell someone like, pause this round because I'm nervous. Nitro, if he's not feeling it, he's like, yo, does someone have an idea? I think his best quality in an overall sense is that he's just a really good team player, which is why he would kind of try to fill gaps at times and would make him worse in his game, because he'd be moving around so much. But he does home in on someone. It's just because he wants to make more space. Like whatever he's doing, it may right or wrong, it is trying to think of in his mind what's better for the team. And I think in game that shows by him being an in-game leader when he not in-game leader, if to make the team better, when entering, making the decisions to not have the best stats, because that's something that affects everyone, right? Stats lead to salaries and lead to everything like that, and you have to have a whole different mentality to do something like that, which is why I think it's working now and not before, like I said. So I think his mentality is just really good right now, and he's been doing a phenomenal job in game leading. I think we've become a lot more versatile now.
So one thing I'd like to talk about a bit more on this show would actually be SK, because I want to get your take on something, Zeus.
Sure.
Like, it's in this lineup where they had this massive amount of success in the summer. They were so good. They're winning nearly every match, it felt like. And during that, yeah, ColdZero and Fur were both insanely good, but also Phelps looked really, really solid. Like he looked like he'd integrated into the team. He had his role. He had his maps that he was good on. Now, he's the player where everyone is blaming when they lose the games. Like, even if Fur did some individual mistakes that people blamed, like at Malmo, for example, mainly it's that Phelps has looked really bad on Inferno and he's had some terrible stats at some of these tournaments. Like, do you actually think that what is your sense from how Fallen uses someone like him? Because I always wondered, right, in the teams of the last few years, you could see kind of Fallen's fingerprints over the players, but this one looked a bit looser, like kind of letting people play their style a little bit more. So, do you think, does he have to have like a tighter leash on some of these players? Does he have to tell them switch up their role? What do you think?
So for SK, right? So one that I mentioned before is player break always kills them. It seems like that, especially going back home and being away from the team. For them, I think most of all, right, when they're in seasons and when they're in the US, they're always together. When they go home, it's a break, it's a month break, whatever it is, but they're apart. So that changes the mentality in some sides. Phelps, I think he's such a talented player, but he's getting in. I know he's getting in his own head a lot right now, because when things start going wrong, everything can seem wrong. Like after that Malmo play where he pushed one in, yeah, that was his fault and his call, and the way he did it was wrong. But then some things, like a lot of things happen, like in the E-League qualifier where there was a round where it was 14-13 on Mirage for them, and Phelps peaks connector.
Massive mistake.
Yeah, and I'm just like, yo, Phelps, what the fuck are you thinking, bro? Like after the match, it's like, are you crazy? And he's like, you won't believe.
But then
and then what happened? ColdZero told him to peak, so he's getting blamed for something that wasn't even his fault.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So, but that keeps getting in your head, and I'm sure he's reading forums and people because Brazilians I love them, but when they're doing bad, they really get on someone's feet. And if they're all the time saying Phelps, you suck, minus Phelps, at some point that's gonna trigger you in some sense. Taco doesn't read Twitter when that shit's happening to him. He's like, fuck it, I'm off this thing. He'll just get off it. And I think a lot of that, and I think it might even be inside SK, he was getting too much criticism, right? Because people are like, Phelps, why are you doing this? Why did you do that? Because of that Mamo play. And that, if it's coming internally, that will mess with the player's head even more with his confidence, what he's supposed to do. So I think maybe for him, I wouldn't say completely take the leash off, but maybe give him more space to actually play his style, because they brought on Phelps because he had such amazing timings and such amazing things for him. You can't completely control a player like that. If you let Fer do what he's going to do, why not let Phelps play his style at times too? It has to be like a give. You concede on one part, I concede on the next.
Okay. So is Fallen the type of in-game leader though, where like, do you think he'll like try and have a set of strict rules, like, okay, we're gonna have to do this differently and this differently? Does he just try and let the player figure it out himself?
No, I think it's like if Phelps were to come to Fall and say, I want to do a demo review, can you help me? If he'd do it, if not, he leaves it a lot. But if it gets to a point, there's going to come a point where he's just like, yo, Phelps, let's go through this demo and tell me what you were thinking during these times, and maybe we can identify the problem. It's not strict at all. Like I said, over there, it's a fundamental thing, right? So it's something people should think already going into the match. So it's not something. There are no strict rules. You just have to have a general thought and a general way to think about the match and make your decisions on it during the match, right? And if you're getting frustrated and you're not feeling it, then you start making less and less of the fundamentals, right? Because you try to overcompensate, or you're just too scared to do a peak that you know you should, and everything like that. And I think that's kind of what's going on with Phelps in particular.
I think they're going to do a roster move, Moses.
No. I don't think they'll do one before the major. I think it would depend on after that. I think they'll stick with this through. Just from talking to some of the guys after they got eliminated at ELEAGUE, they still feel very confident in this lineup, and they still obviously know the potential of it is great. I think at the moment, and I think this explains a lot, I think there is just this lack of comfort across all the players in the team. And you notice it out of coldzera's performances, where he's been the most consistent player since he joined this team in late 2015 or whatever the fuck it was. Like, he's been incredible, and I think now we're starting to see his performances dip. I think even Fer, from what we've seen out of him earlier in the year, he's not playing as confident. And I think also because of that, then you have someone like Phelps, who I feel like his play style is to be a little bit more aggressive. He wants to make his plays on the opposing team's side of the map. He doesn't want to play passively and just wait for a mistake and then wait for something to happen so that he can move forward. He wants to be the initiator. He wants to get into a good position and use that map control. And I think with the passive way that SK is playing at the moment doesn't allow him to do that. So he's not feeling comfortable. I think it's a great many things where a lot of these players just at the moment are not feeling good within the game of Counter-Strike, whether it's a drop of individual motivation. And when once that feeling kind of seeps in, I think, Zeus mentioned they just don't have momentum anymore the way that they used to, and they did during that run during the summer. I think everyone begins to play worse. And I think that's what we're seeing, is that everyone on that team collectively not playing well. So I think they all kind of look at it and they just say, we're going to stick with this. We know we're going to be good as soon as we just get our groove back. They all need to start playing better individually and see what happens from there. But at the moment, I think everyone just kind of feels like they're 2 steps below where they should be on an individual player level.
Do you think that SK needs a coach, Zeus? Do they miss not having a coach anymore? I mean, obviously they won tournaments without you, but like whenever you have issues of like player confidence or someone playing his role badly, sometimes it's tougher if you're actually in the game as the in-game leader to bring that stuff up, right?
Yeah, I mean that's very personal, right? Because before, when I was with them, the rules were different as well and everything like that. Right now, coaches are a bit castrated, as I've always said, and hopefully that changes soon. So if that changes, then I'd say maybe, right? But I know Ricardo does his job. Like, he does the analytical work over there and the preparation. They always go into everything prepared for everything. So I don't think it's a lack in preparation. Maybe with a different coach they'd get some different views, but I don't necessarily think it's a tactical thing that's going on right there or anything like that. For the environment, who am I to say? I'm not there anymore, so I don't know what their interpersonal relationships are and how that could be better or worse, because coaches, that is a big part of the coach's job. But I also know that their coach, Ded or Ricardo, he does that stuff, right? So maybe it's not a coach thing. If it changes, then maybe they reevaluate that. For right now, I think they're good as it is, to be honest.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think you can. I think now with the major cycle starting to come back up, I think it would be a mistake for them to make a roster change. And I think also you have to look at it and say, yes, they found Coldzera out of the wild of Brazilian Counter-Strike. I mean, he was probably known within that scene, obviously. Phelps was showing himself very well, but with, the disaster that is the Immortals lineup at the moment and those players and that whole situation, they're not going to get anyone from Immortals, I imagine. Who else can they actually find someone who will be better for them within the next 4 months, 3 months?
So I'm going to say SK is not going to be making changes before the major. I think that's pretty obvious, but I disagree with the Immortals thing. I think if SK calls anyone from Brazil, they will find a way to make it happen, because if a player wants to go to the team, that's what in a way, if the organization is willing to pay the money, it might come down to that.
Yeah,
okay,
but what
so
Immortals...
Here's a question. So Zeus, Bolts and Steel have already been in Luminosity in this core team in the past, right? I think if you look at both of them, they look like much improved players and they really overcame a lot of the issues. I mean, remember, it was like 2 years ago they were in those teams. But do you think the players in SK would actually consider them, though? Like, do they look at them as improved players, or would they look at someone like Bolts and think, well, that's the guy that we kicked out the team?
I think consider them. They'd for sure have to. They're not in the position, like you said, there isn't any outstanding talent coming up right now, so they'd be forced to consider it. If they do it or not, that's a little more difficult. My personal opinion is I think they'd consider it, but I don't think maybe the history would still affect it.
Guys, we're missing the biggest key here.
Yeah.
There is no way Immortals allows that to happen until they figure out how the fuck they're going to keep the major spot. Like, there's no way Immortals...
Remember, the players' contracts end before the major.
Do they?
Yeah, as far as I know, that's the problem. Otherwise, if you think about it, otherwise it wouldn't be a problem, would it? Because if the contracts all stayed after the major, I believe they said November myself, but I'll look it up.
I imagine Bolts and Steel are staying with Immortals. That seems
those
like
players, yes.
Yeah.
But I think the ones that are supposedly leaving end before, and that's why they're in trouble. Because if those players just leave, then it's not like Okay, here's the question, Zeus. So every idiot on Reddit thinks we've missed the obvious name, because they all think that FNX is going to go back to SK.
Oh yeah. So
is that even a possibility?
No, I don't think so. I mean, one, he's been outside the scene now for a little bit, so it would be kind of a gamble on SK's part. I think FNX is an amazing player when he's motivated, but that's the key word, when he's motivated, right? I think FNX is going to be way more motivated to go into the nightclub team with the Twins and KNG.
As if that's actually what it's called, okay.
But then he would be in SK, right? Because SK, in a sense, like I don't know how they ended, because it was after I left, but I don't think it was an amazing ending, right? They probably they're friends now and everything like that, but I don't know if the team feeling is there. I think FNX playing with the Twins, they all have something to prove, right? So as much as they fucked up and everything they do, that's still going to be a scary team once it's made.
I hope they get like some Brazilian,
at least for a little while, until if the passion burns out, then it's a different thing always. Yeah.
That would be the most next level thing if they had like a title sponsor that was just a nightclub in Brazil. Something that would just be so beautiful.
The Brazilian name that they say is Team Villa Mix. That's actually the name of a nightclub in Brazil that they're playing around with. No, they're not going to use that, of course. It's just the community likes to refer to them like that.
All right.
Well, no, that would be the genius move, wouldn't it? You actually have, in like a back room in the nightclub, that's where your actual like boot camp area is. So then you got the excuse. Well, obviously I was in the nightclub all night. I was practicing, bro. Like I need to go. Anyway, I'm just going to get a drink. Anyone want anything, water or anything? That would be genius. Yeah, then you have the excuse to be there. Yeah.
And just to reiterate on the SK coach thing, just because I'm thinking here, it's not that I'm saying that they shouldn't get a coach because coaches don't have much power, because coaches can still help so much and do everything. And I think that they're, not just because I do it, but they can be main parts of the success of a team and at least doing it. I think it's just, if they were to focus on a coach, they'd be scapegoating their issues, right? That isn't the time to focus on that. The coach is not the problem right now. Maybe it's something that can make them reach their peak level again if they were to go in that direction in the future. But I think right now they have to hash out the troubles that they're obviously having within the roster, right? Or else it wouldn't get to this level.
Can I ask you a question? Why has ZQK made a return to the world?
Okay, here we go.
So I don't know. I honestly don't know.
Where did this come from? Why is all of a sudden like Ghost picked him up? Bees Money Crew picked him up. Why is that? Misfits played with him for a little bit.
I mean, because the first people to try him for sure is because he can in-game lead an op, but his opping has been bad, but then he goes back to Brazil and he get like in the local lands, the Brazilian scene, he goes and keeps getting 40, 45 kills. So he's obviously still better than the people in Brazil. So when people ask for referrals, like who's the best player, they look and they don't know anyone there. If they look at stats, ZQK has great stats in Brazil. I think that's why these lower teams and Ghosts and everything would try him out, because people are still in the Brazil hype train. It's like, oh, let's get the next Cold Zero from there and everything like that.
You know, Taco told me something crazy at one point. He told me that ZQK in the Brazilian scene, like, or at least the players in the professional level, still believe to a certain degree that he is more talented than Fallen with an AWP, that like he has all the skills to be a better opper. He just never put in the work and never had the work ethic and the focus to actually get there.
That's crazy, but believe it or not, ZQK was a fucking monster with the op. Like, I don't know what happened, because I consider him a friend of mine, but his skill has dropped to another level. He was insane with the op. Like, he was really good. I really don't know how it happened, but he's just nowhere near the same player he used to be or showed potential to be.
Okay. That thing is, though, when you said that, Moses, that sounded like fake news. Like that sounds so.
But think about it.
Listen,
like when he
told
was
me
on
that,
LG,
my jaw dropped.
What?
Yeah.
Remember, right, when he was on Keed Stars and everything like that, for Fallen to give up the op for ZQK, there had to be something there.
Sure.
Fallen wouldn't. So even Fallen believed it to a certain level, at least at that time. So it showed that that kid was nuts when they built that team, and he was the better operator at the time. It just didn't stay like that, I guess.
Okay. Right. I think this is the end of the episode, right, Moses?
Yeah, unless you got anything else you want to touch on. We could do if you want to, we could do bracket predictions for the playoffs.
Let's do that then. Okay, let's predict the bracket.
Oh crap!
I'll put the link in chat, Zeus.
Right, I actually think if you look at the first round, they've actually got some. I don't think there's going to be too many surprises, but you have to remember they play out all of E-League in like a week. So basically, we're predicting the whole bracket.
Yep.
Oh.
So. Because it just plays day to day to day. You just go one day, then the next day, then the next day.
I think there's 2 BO3s a day. So it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Friday.
Okay, first question then. I actually think one of the most, in theory, on paper, competitive of the best of threes is the first one. It's Cloud9 versus G2. So who wins this one, Moses?
I'm taking G2 on this one. I think they're going to just have to be
C9?
I mean, listen. This is going to be a cool matchup. I think because I think both teams have a lot of individual skill, and I think Cloud9 still hasn't gotten a great base to this new lineup, and still really hasn't figured things out. So I think there's going to be just a lot of like fun individual aim battles all over the map. I think there's at times going to be some fast-paced aggressiveness as well, which could make it fun. And listen, that they very well can win, just because, again, like we mentioned at the beginning of the show, G2 just seems so inconsistent that you can never feel like you can rely on the form you saw him in at the previous tournament. But I'm going to go and say that at least against Cloud9, we're going to see a really solid G2. I think Kenny is going to be on form. Kenny's always deadly. So I'm just going to take G2 in that matchup.
Yeah, on that matchup, I think it's going to be one of the closest ones for sure. But I think G2 should edge them out, because I just see them as a more well-rounded out team. I think Cloud9 is still trying to learn their identity in a sense. They don't have an identity to them. It's just that, right? They're still trying to mix and match, and G2 skillful-wise is at least just as talented as Cloud9, if not more, and they have a better base of a team.
Yeah, I think G2's going to win that one. I think it's pretty solid. I think also map pool's pretty good for G2. That's one of the areas where they've really rounded themselves out since their problems in the summer. Okay, so Astralis versus the new Fnatic, and obviously this is the Fnatic that is Golden and Lekro, and then the classic players. So actually a team where some people, I mean, if Immortals had have gone with their real lineup, maybe wouldn't even be here, because that was the group that they were in, but they had to use Kogu. Right? Who wins this one, Moses?
I'm taking Astralis in this one. Although it is kind of funny, I think Fnatic just beat them twice online yesterday in Pro League. Take that for what it's worth, but that's kind of cool. It's pretty bad. It was like 16-4 and 16-8 or something crazy like that. But I think on LAN, it's a different animal. I think once again, as everything we mentioned, Astralis is a team that minimizes the amount of mistakes, and they're so good at capitalizing on them. And I think Fnatic is going to give them plenty of opportunities. Not to mention Astralis, when we saw them at E-League, was so impressive in their group. They had some of the best utility usage I've seen in a long time in terms of pop flashing for their teammates at just the right moment and setting up smokes for their teammates. I think Astralis is just too good of a team to drop a series to Fnatic on LAN at this point in time.
Yeah, I'm with Jason. I'm just going to call Astralis flat out just because I think they're the better team.
Yeah. I also think another factor that's unfortunate for Fnatic in this matchup is like from all the interviews, they basically say that they actually have taken Golden and just basically told him like, you are the in-game leader, like just tell us what to do, like tell us how you want us to play. And so in theory, they are trying to be more tactical because obviously the lineup they had before that was like the exact opposite, you know, where they just tried to go on the idea that they're so experienced they could all make plays. So I feel like unfortunately, this is in theory the one top team you don't want to run right into if that's the style of play you're trying to run, because Astralis is just better than you at that in all regards. So that's probably not even a very good style to try and match up with.
It is kind of a cool though, the way that, because I've seen them play in matches where it has it looks like they've almost let Golden just like this is going to sound, I guess, a little bit harsh, but they've just let him fail throughout like a half when they're at tournaments and just say, you're just going to learn like trial by fire. We're just throwing you into the deep end. We're going to let you struggle. Where they've had halves where instead of trying to break out of like a tactical approach that isn't working and allow some freedom to make, plays to open things up, they've still just let Golden call, which is, I mean, obviously it's not great in the short term when you lose those matches, but it is like, you're giving your in-game leader, the chance to try and figure things out as they go. So this just strikes me as a long-term project for Fnatic.
Okay. So this one is not really that exciting a matchup, but FaZe Clan is playing Envious. And just to confirm, the match will be played on LAN. So who do you think will win this game, Moses? Listen, on the internet, I'd go ahead and say Envious could get him. I think they could. On the internet, like fucking, I don't know what Happy does when, as soon as his ping goes over like 30, fucking hell, that guy can just do anything on the internet. So what will happen on LAN though when these teams play?
This is going to be a battering, I think. I think FaZe is going to just roll them over. I don't know if Envious has a player, unless Scream has one of his games that can really match up with anyone on FaZe. And remember, the only reason that Envy even got through the group was because RPK was a god for a weekend. Yes. I don't see that happening again.
Okay.
Yeah, I think logically FaZe should beat this 99 times out of 100. But I don't know, Envy sometimes they. Like you said, sometimes, right?
Here he is.
But I'd put it with RPK is going to have an exceptional performance because I think he's just such a core member to that team. For them to even have a shot at beating FaZe, I think RPK is going to have to step it up and just be like the overall best position player on the map.
Yeah. I think this one, even just from the outset, is a bad mismatch because, like I said before, unfortunately, Envious is like clear best upset map is Cobblestone, and even though FaZe is a new team, they still just ban that at the moment. They've kept that as the permaban, so that's your best map out of the pool. Then their next best map's like Inferno. Well, at the moment, no one wants to play FaZe on that map, so that's not really a great sign. And then RPK has been pretty good recently, pretty solid. The problem is, actually, one of the most depressing things about Envy is that Scream hasn't really had that many of those crazy series. You always hoped when he went to this lineup, okay, even if they aren't really, really good, at least hopefully he'll have certain matches where he just carries and you're like, right, well, you've got a chance as long as you've got Scream. If anything, he's the talented player on that team who I think's the most disconnected from the team. He never seems to really go off like he used to. I'm not sure why exactly. Okay, so the last matchup is North Heroic. And obviously this one, on paper, doesn't look as great, but it is an all-Danish matchup. These are players that know each other. Valde obviously used to be on Heroic. What do you think of this one?
I think this is actually sneakily going to be one of the, you wouldn't think it on paper because of Heroic, but I still think this can be a really, really good quarterfinal matchup in this. I think North's going to win it, but there's definitely an opportunity for Heroic to get an upset. I don't think North is quite at that level where they're just, guaranteed, as a favorite into this kind of a game, just to guarantee walk away with the win. And especially if we have guys on Heroic, if you have guys like Yugi and Nico, if they're playing the way they did during the group stage, there can be an upset here. There can be some potential. And Heroic is another one of those teams. Like I mentioned, it just seems to be like a Danish, part of the Danish Counter-Strike is just another one of their teams that is very, very good at minimizing critical mistakes in their setups and how they play individually. So there's a possibility that Heroic here can still surprise, but I'm going to take North.
Yeah, like I said, local matchups are complicated, right? They're way harder to predict than normal ones because none of these teams are going to be playing their normal game. They're going to be having to try to do something because I imagine they know each other so well. At least that's what I compare ourselves to when it was SK Immortals and everything like that. It's just a completely different game. I think North should win this like 65% of the times, but I still think Heroic has a really good shot, especially if they perform like ELEAGUE. But I'm going to predict North, and I hope North because I really want to see North and FaZe, which would be next. If Heroic does manage that, there's no way they're getting past FaZe.
Yeah. So I also agree that I think there is like a sneaky chance for an upset here, especially because I feel like this is a really great example as well. Like if it was Heroic versus Astralis, right, then I think it's less of a factor because unfortunately if you're the Heroic players there, you sort of are like, you do kind of like, in a way, look up to those players like Device and Dupree, people who've been at the top forever in your country. But the difference is when you look at some of the North guys, you actually kind of feel like, yeah, their team's above me, but I'm at their level. Like if I'm Nico and Juggy and I'm looking at like Valde and Config, I'm like, you guys aren't really that far ahead of me. You're maybe like a year ahead of me or a year and a half. You'd feel like you should be able to compete with them, so there shouldn't be any intimidation factor. I do think though that like this is like a real test for MSL because in theory Heroic is a pretty tactical team and they do really have like a lot that they've built up. So I want to see if MSL, the reason why I felt like North got upset by underdogs so much this year is because he almost plays like okay, what's bizarre is, first of all, he does those vetoes again and again where he just like picks a map that the other team's good on as well. Like he just routinely does that. So you're already giving him an opening there. And then also, it feels like he just expects his team should be better than teams like that, which isn't really the mentality you'd want from someone who in theory is a pretty good in-game leader. So I think that gives an opening. I would still go ahead and say North should win it though. I don't really see logically why they wouldn't.
I think Heroic's going to have an advantage in the op department, though. I think Yugi with the op is going to beat Cajun B with the AWP on the other side of things. So I think that's one thing that can help propel them.
I'm not a huge believer in him myself, but we'll see. We'll see if this one is the battleground that plays out. Okay, so in the other one, then we have G2 Astralis as a semi-final, which is an interesting matchup because it's actually barely ever happened. Like this year, these teams, even though they've been in finals and top four, they almost never meet basically in best of three scenarios. So what do you think happens this time?
I'm going to take Astralis in this one. And it comes down to the fact, I think G2, I think this is going to be a game that can obviously either team can win. It just comes down to the fact that G2 is still to me just feels inconsistent. And I'm always very scared to pick them in a prediction just because I don't know which one I'm going to see. And then just Astralis is like Old Faithful. They just play solid Counter-Strike. In terms of, I think they have the tools to kind of win this. If Kenny S doesn't go off, I think that Astralis should be able to win this. If you get the God tier Kenny S, I think G2 will win it. But I think it is going to come down to that.
This is a pretty hard one to call. Like it doesn't happen so much, and I think Astralis gets the better of them most times. But from my memory, at least, I don't have like stats in front of me. But I don't remember G2 showing up that much in the Astralis match. Like it wasn't the G2 that could be. So I'm going to predict G2 on this one just because I think they're in a good moment right now. And I think that if they come in with the right mindset, they can 100% take Astralis out.
Yeah, I'm actually going to go G2 as well. Like I do think if you just want to look for consistency, Astralis should be very tough. Like it'll be really hard to beat them in a full best of three. But I actually still think G2's the team where, like, I think their ceiling is still very, very high. So I think they can hit that, and I think that not many teams can deal with them at that point in time. So I still want to see, like, the key for me with G2 is I hope that, like at Malmo, they still actually do some real saves and don't just force buy all the time, because when they didn't do that, when they did proper economical management, they looked amazing. Like, admittedly, yes, all other factors had to go well as also. It wasn't just like the everyday performance, but I do think that now they've sort of figured some of that out. So I hope that carries on and then they can win, because I think otherwise that's an area where Astralis is a great team to test that, because they aren't a team that fucks around and force buys every round. So you're going to give up 3 rounds if you don't do it correctly.
Yeah, if G2 is undisciplined, Astralis should take it, but I'm just predicting a different G2 to show up, something more structured.
Also, I will say this factor. One thing I do want to see in terms of that matchup is, okay, so we saw before when Device had all that time to prepare to play against Fallen at the Major, he pulled off that amazing performance where you go and look on Overpass, and he's not just like out shooting Fallen. He literally actually makes really educated guesses based on his demos as to where Fallen will be. And so when he peeks into Fallen, like there was one that was brilliant where he literally had an angle where when Fallen did like the fast peek up out of the bathrooms area on overpass. Like Device's angle was the one where it would be like sort of the last place that Fallen's angle would see, and so he literally just killed him by just seeing him like half a second early. So here's the one thing I will say that would be very interesting, is knowing that you might play G2 here and having a day, I want to see if Device can do anything like that against Kenny, because actually Kenny's a player who is actually ripe to be picked like that. Like, he really does go to the same spot again and again, but there is a reason why he does that and is still considered one of the best AWPers in the world, because he's so ridiculously good. He still kills you even when sometimes you know he's going to be there. So that's the ultimate test for this like homework version of Device, who supposedly is getting his edges in that way. That's a pretty tough call. You know, a lot of people have thought they knew where Kenny S was going to be and still lost the game. So that's a fun one. Okay, on the other side of the bracket then, I do think that FaZe versus North is a very intriguing matchup. This is one I'm pretty excited for. So what do you think, Moses?
I'm taking
Doesn't
FaZe
sound
on
like
this one.
you're not buying North, right?
No, I really like North. I really like so far some of their early returns. I'm still worried. I don't think they've proved how high their ceiling is, and I think especially against a team like FaZe, I think North is going to be a very good and dangerous team against other like of the more tactical teams. I think it's like the individual skill-based teams like FaZe, G2 for instance. I think those are the teams that are going to be very tough for them to beat, just because of the amount of talent they can spread out across the map and the amount of like, you know, battles and duels they'll have advantages in against North. Like I said earlier, I think it's Config and I think it's Valdi that have like the best opportunities to win some of those battles. Outside of that, I don't necessarily see where North is going to have these great wins. I think AZ is going to be outmatched. I think MSL is obviously going to be outmatched, and I think Cajun, he just hasn't been at the level where he's going to be able to consistently compete in those kind of scenarios. So I think FaZe is going to be very, very good in this matchup. And I just have them taking it. I think it should be close. I like a lot of what Valdi has offered, because one of the things he's done coming in and Magis stepping away is give that star power performance that isn't like the massive peak necessarily, but it's just like consistence in its excellence. And that's what they were always missing when you have Config, who's a very aggressive player. Magis was also very aggressive. They're going to beat in certain situations when they do that over and over. So Valdi provides some kind of a rock that they can all rely on in whatever position he's playing in to get that double kill when it's needed. But I still think FaZe is just going to outmatch him.
Okay.
All right. After everything I've said, like
there we go.
After
I hear something coming here. I hear a call.
No, it's
I love it.
It's the least fun way to do it. But like I said, Config I think is a player that can shine in this match, and I think he's going to have a really good match. But I still think North is going to get killed.
Okay.
Ooh. That's it. I was expecting something more. That was much of a letdown.
That's the problem.
Like I said, don't expect much, man.
Like, the funny thing is, I do think that the stars of North are really well suited to play well against FaZe. Like, Config, as we kind of touched on, like, the guy, not only is his skill level really nuts, like, I think his aim's some of the best I've ever seen in CS. It's ridiculous, like the first bullet. But also, he actually has the kind of confidence, which actually is just cockiness. Like, he actually just legit believes he's the best player. And as much as that can cause problems in some areas, it also can be really good, because actually you don't want the guy going up against FaZe who's like, well, I'm pretty good, but you know, they've got better players. You actually kind of want the simple Config guy who's like, I'm the best. It's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we need you to think that, you know. So that's a good sign. I also think Valde is a player suited to do well against a team like FaZe, because I think that the players who can do well against FaZe, because there's got so many like mad aimers, are just the really solid players. Like people like Valde, Zipnix, these guys don't play their careers thinking, I'm going to peek an angle and shoot him in the head first. That's not their game at all. So they, in theory, I think are a really good matchup. The problem is, this is actually where I think the pick ban alone is going to be so tough for North, because first of all, I really like them on Cobblestone. Probably not going to get to play that. That's probably the logical ban. So then you have to look, like, will MSL break out of what I said before and try picks that can potentially be tough for FaZe? Like, for example, a logical pick here should be Nuke. Like, that's a map they haven't really played much. Seems like they lost it the one time they played it on LAN. If I'm North, you've always been good at it. I'd consider that definitely. But old MSL's way of thinking usually isn't that way. Like, I could see him in a world where he picks Inferno or something nuts like that, you know, which is, I think, dangerous as fuck. Also, I think, yeah, again, Mirage will be played in the series, and I would edge that to FaZe. So, unfortunately, I think FaZe will probably win this one. But hopefully, I hope even if FaZe win it, it's kind of one of those matches that, like, hints at, like, a better matchup the next time they play, like a real rivalry, someone who can match up well. So, okay, here's the question then. Who wins the tournament, Moses?
I'm just going to say FaZe is going to win it.
There we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna follow you. I'm just gonna say.
I mean,
FaZe.
whether it's G2 or Astralis, I think FaZe is still going to be in that good honeymoon period. I think the only team that could beat him in the finals, I don't think G2 can necessarily do it. Well, I mean they can, but I don't think they have a high likelihood of doing it. I think Astralis has the best chance of beating them, but I still think FaZe is going to be able to edge that one.
Yeah, I think Astralis would have a pretty cool matchup against them, and I'd want to see it. But like I said, I still think G2 is gonna be in the finals for this one. And the only way I could see G2 doing this is not even on only Kenny S. Kenny S is gonna have to show up, and we're gonna have to see godlike shocks again, like the shocks that we're used to. If
That
he
ain't
has the
happening, bro. That ain't happening.
if
Can we
he
all
has-
just give
if he
up on
can-
that dream?
If he can find the confidence to do this style of play that he was good at before, he was so good at it before. Like, but other than that,
you
it's
need
gonna
god
be FaZe.
tier. You need
Yeah.
god tier entry fragging Apex, and you need god tier opping Kenny S if you want a chance.
Don't need any of that shit. I'm taking G2 to win the tournament.
Fucking hell, here
First
he is.
things first, they can pick Nuke if they want. That's right there on the table, and they're fucking amazing on Nuke. So I'd love that one if they pick it. Also, like, I admit, if Mirage is there, that's going to be tough. I actually will be interested to see what they ban, because in theory, there's nothing really logically they should actually have to ban against FaZe. So that's interesting what they'll do in the veto. I also think they're one of the few teams on Inferno who really can match up against FaZe. So while I won't, like, here's the thing with G2. I don't ever feel confidence in them. Like, I don't think, like, I know exactly how they're going to play. That's actually one of the things I have a real big problem with them. Like, I never know what level Apex is going to come in. I don't know what the fuck MBK is going to do. But predictions aren't always about using the old computer and trying to figure out the odds. Sometimes you got to go with intuition, your gut feeling. And I'm saying Kenny S, I think he's the best player in the world. Don't give a fuck what you think, egg-shaped motherfucker, or former SK coach. I'm saying G2 wins this one. And when they do, I'll probably just be completely obnoxious as fuck. Actually, so Bakesy nothing will change then. So
Yeah, I was going to say,
and
that's
if they lose, I'll trigger everyone by doing all tweets like, "Oh, it was just a crazy guess anyway. I always knew that FaZe guy was really good." You know? But just leave it like that. Leave it on that note. So,
Carajo.
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 Hey, I'm Hiko, the Master Baiter, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube.